Now, I bet you didn't know that PRS built a Van Halen amp, right? Well, they did, and they called it the EVH-X. Look, it's written on here, right here. Look, check it out. Yeah, it's right on there. Yeah. And it even has a Van Halen logo on it, and it sounds like Eddie, and they didn't tell any of us. And if you believe that, I've got a lovely three-legged pony I'd like to sell to you too. Obviously, I stuck this on. Welcome back to the channel, folks, and if you're new to the channel, then it's great to see you here. So the wonderful folks at PRS create some amazing amplifiers, and this is one of them. Of course, it isn't the EVH-X. I put the sticker on there. And I also put the Van Halen logo on there as well. It is actually the HDRX 20. This is the 20 watt version of their HDRX line of amplifiers, and this amp was actually inspired and designed by one Mr. James Marshall Hendrix, affectionately known to us as Jimmy. A very, very, very cool cat who was known for cranking his 100 watt Marshall stacks up to 10 and making some glorious noises with them. It's kind of like Hendrix and Van Halen had an amp baby and PRS was the proud parent. But you know what, I grew up in the 80s, and when someone mentions the Marshall Plexi to me, I immediately think of another famous person who was using Marshall Plexi heads cranked to 10. In fact, he played them at 11 and made even more outrageous noises. His name was, of course, Edward Ludwig Van Halen, and like Jimmy before him, he also changed the course of rock and roll history. Now, I'm a really big fan of PRS gear. I have several of their guitars. I have an MT15 amp, and I have been really curious about the HDRX for a while because I'm also a big fan of the Marshall Plexi. And my custom built 69 spec 50 watt Plexi head is one of the most amazing sounding amps that I own. But when I looked on YouTube, 99.9999999% of videos showed just blues and low gain tones from the HDRX. And truth be told, they didn't really inspire me. Then I came across one video, just one video, where a guy had a HDRX 20 amp cranked, and I literally shouted at the screen, "That's it! That's the tone, hallelujah!" And it was time for me to buy one of these, and I did, pretty much immediately. Hey, before I tell you all about this awesome little amplifier, did you know that 77% of you who watch my videos aren't subscribed to my channel? That's crazy, right? Well, I don't want you to ever miss out on these cool videos that I put out. So make sure you smash that subscribe button and hit the bell notification as well, so you know when the next video comes out. Thanks so much. You guys rock. Okay, let me tell you where I got this amplifier. So here's the story behind this amplifier. Last week I was watching some videos on YouTube, and a video came up by Peach Guitars about the HDRX 20, and a very nice chap said for a limited time these amps are just £499. And I'm like, what? That's crazy insane. That's like £200 discount on the usual price. And you know, this is in no way a sponsored video. Peach Guitars didn't send me this amp, and nor did PRS. I bought this amp with my own money from the lovely people at Peach Guitars, where incidentally I bought my PRS MT15 amp as well. And I bought the HDRX because I knew I could make it sound like Van Halen. It's a Plexi, it has to do that thing, right? And you know what? I was not wrong. This amp is a little firecracker. Wow, totally amazing. It may only vaguely resemble a Marshall Plexi in its aesthetics, but I can certainly hear the Plexi DNA in this amp. When it arrived, I hooked it up to my Gens-Benz 412, turned everything up to 10 apart from the bass volume, and it immediately had me grinning like a cat who had just been at the cream. That glorious tone that I wanted to hear on every video that I saw, but I didn't hear. It was right there. It sounded like I expected it to, and more. This thing goes to 11, and trust me, it is loud enough to wake the neighbors and their ancestors. It's punchy, it's full, it's gainy, but not too gainy. The overtones were there, and it's a pretty aggressive sounding amp too, which I understand from my friend and my student Mark shout out to Mark by the way, is what Hendrix's amp is supposed to sound like. And I was pretty much immediately blown away by this. I loved it straight off the bat. Now my aim was to always dial in this amp for the Van Halen tone, but of course the DNA of this amplifier lies in the connection with Jimi Hendrix. The story goes that Paul Reed Smith and PRS amp designer Doug Sewell had the opportunity to examine a Marshall Plexi that Jimi actually toured with and then modeled the HDRX on that, hence the HDRX, or Hendrix. Get it? You're welcome. Can you imagine that? The chance not just to be in the presence of gear that was caressed by the hands of a legend, but to be able to actually examine the inside of it as well. You know, I've built several amps, and for someone like me, that's like being able to see the mechanism that makes Pandora's box work. Mind-blowing. Like I said earlier, the amp certainly sounds like a Plexi. Does it sound exactly like my 69 spec head? Well, not a carbon copy, but the essence and the character is definitely there. It has oodles of that crunchy tone, a lovely saturation, but it has to be turned up to maximum. The layout is beautifully Plexi SIMPLEXITY. Get it? You're welcome, again. And what I mean by that is that the layout might be simple, but there is a beautiful complexity working under the hood. We have a bass, middle, treble and presence control to shape the tone. A treble and bass volume, these are basically the volume 1 and volume 2 controls that you find on your regular Plexi, and essentially they're the gain knobs of a Plexi. The channels are actually internally jumpered as well, so you don't need a patch cable to bridge to the channels. If you want to use just one or other of the treble or bass channels, all you have to do is dial the volume on that channel. If the volume's at 0, the channel is basically switched off and out of the circuit. And if you want to blend the channels, then you just dial in how much of each you would like. For my Van Halen inspired tone, I just dialed up the treble channel to full and had the bass volume turned all the way down, as that gave me the most Van Halen-ish kind of vibe and tone. But I did experiment with blending the channels, and I was able to get some really delicious, tasty tones out of this amplifier. The amp also has a switchable bright cap. I really like that evolution of the Plexi platform, because when the bright cap is in circuit, when you dial up the treble channel, it's kind of like nothing, 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 everything. It just comes on all of a sudden. It's like the amp suddenly remembered it had a coffee in the morning. Taking the bright cap out allows the treble volume to dial in some lower gain sounds as well, which I really enjoyed doing with this amplifier. This amp also has a very cool boost function built right into it. It isn't like a high gain mode or anything like that though. It's essentially like a treble booster, just kissing the front end of the amp and adding some high mids. It's like giving your tone a bit of a superhero cape. It works great and sounds pretty amazing to my ears. Like a Plexi, this amp has 3 12AX7 tubes in the preamp and 2 5881 tubes in the power section. And although Marshall is more famous for using EL34 tubes in the power section, the first JTM 45 builds actually used 5881 tubes, as did some of the later models which were sold in the USA. I even recall Dave Friedman saying years ago that 6L6, 5881 or 6550 tubes could be used in the Marshall style circuit with some tweaks to keep that Marshall sound going. But everyone expects EL34s in Marshall style amps, so everyone who builds that style of amp uses EL34s. Now this amp actually has a master volume as well, and I'm going to guess that it's a pre-phase inverter, because when it's turned down, the amp does lose some of its teeth. This is not a bad thing though, because unlike a regular Plexi head, I was able to dial in some really lovely clean and edge of breakup tones by dialing up the treble and the bass volumes, but then dropping back the master volume. But when you want that really aggressive, saturated, high gain Plexi tone, then the master needs to live on its maximum setting. At 10, it's not just an amp, it's a time machine straight back to 1978. That's where the Plexi lives. It's that plain and simple. Anything less and the Plexi doesn't behave or sound like a Plexi. It's supposed to be like a completely crazy wild animal which you have to wrestle to control, and that's part of the charm of the Plexi. You got to play them loud and you got to play them proud. So my master volume lives at 10, and when it's there, that magic and alchemy happens. The amp comes alive. You can feel it when you're playing it, and it is glorious. I think that every guitar player should experience a Plexi on 10 just once in their lifetime. But folks, please protect your hearing, because these things are freakishly loud. Even this little 20-watt version makes one hell of a racket. And I really love that this amp is a fire-breathing dragon when wound up, but turns into a purring pussycat when you back off on the guitar volume. It's very dynamic and responsive, and during the track, which you'll hear a little bit later, you'll hear I did that whole Van Halen Hot for Teacher thing where I backed off on the volume, then I brought it up. Worked so well, worked like a charm. The tone is to die for. It goes without saying that it is amazingly good, and I really dig it. Do you dig it? Let me know in the comments. The rhythm tones are crunchy and aggressive and smooth and creamy and in your face, all at the same time, and that's the whole Plexi SIMPLEXITY thing going on. There are a lot of harmonic overtones that happen in these amps, which you really get to understand as you play it and as you get to know the amplifier. For lead tones, I added just a tiny bit of boost with my JP OD1 pedal, but it was just a hair, as you can see from the dials on my pedal. It literally is just blowing on the front end of the amp, just a tiny bit. And I use the boost because when you're using a low box with an amp like this, I tend to find that there's a little bit of gain loss because there is no physical interaction between the speaker cab and the amp at high volume. So I used the pedal to match the gain that I was actually hearing in the room when I was plugged straight into the amp and the amp was plugged into my cab. The pedal also tightened up the tone a little bit, which worked really well for my solos. On the back of the amp, it is really simple too, just connections for speakers and a plug for the power cable. And a nice addition is having the external bias adjustment, which is really helpful to keep your amp in tip-top shape. It doesn't have an effects loop, and that's a really good thing because it preserves the spirit and the tone of a Plexi. Putting a loop in an amp like this would inevitably alter the tone just a little bit, and I'm really happy to see that PRS opted to preserve the purity of the original amp design. So kudos to Paul and the team at PRS for not putting a loop in this amp. I have loved playing through this amplifier. You heard it in the intro clip, and you will hear it in a second in the full version of that Van Halen inspired composition as well. This amp has some serious Eddie DNA in it, as well as some Jimi DNA. PRS did an amazing job of it, I think, so kudos to them for putting out such a great little monster of an amp. So here's the deal. If you've been thinking about pulling the trigger on one of these babies, then now is the time, because they are at such an incredible price right now. Head down to Peach Guitars, the store, or the website, obviously after you finish watching this video, because you really don't want to miss the track at the end. It is epic, trust me. I will leave a link to their website in the description box below, so go and check that out. A huge shout out to Luke and Sean in customer services at Peach Guitars, absolute legends, as they helped me out with a huge amount, and they were totally amazing. Kudos to you guys, thank you so much. And as if that isn't enough, right now, if you purchase one of these amps in the UK, then PRS have a promotion going between July and September 2024. So when you buy a PRS amp, you'll be able to send off for one of their very cool effects pedals completely free of charge. Let me say that again, completely free of charge. Again, mind blown. I have already sent off for mine. You'll have to wait and see what I get, but in the meantime, feel free to guess in the comment section which one I chose. These pedals are like between $200 and $400 each. So it's just an incredibly ridiculously good deal, because you get an insane discount on the amp, and then you get a really expensive pedal as well, completely free. That's a win-win in my book. Now you guys might have noticed in the intro clip that I got to take that amazing PRS SECE Swamp Ash out for another spin. But the eagle-eyed amongst you might have spied another very cool guitar in there too. That's right folks, my PRS family has grown with this stunning USA made CE24 in this beautiful transparent black burst. This guitar is sensational and feels just like my custom 24 guitars, but with a bolt-on neck. So it's a little bit brighter, but it is also a semi-hollow, so the mid-range on this thing is so stunning and sweet. I absolutely love playing this guitar. Now I do wonder what Eddie would be saying right now. My style with PRS guitars? I can almost hear him chuckling from guitar heaven. I still miss Ed, such a beautiful soul and an incredible guitar player. But you know what? These PRS guitars paired with this HDRX 20 amp are a match made in rock and roll paradise. Alrighty girls and guys, it is Van Halen time. Yay! Enjoy the track and let me know what you think of the tones from this amazing little beast of an amplifier. Enjoy your day and remember to subscribe, like and comment. And if you dig what I do and would like some one-to-one contact with me, behind the scenes footage, and to find out all the little secrets that happen, then you can always check out my Patreon page where I am very active. I think you guys will enjoy it and I'd love for you to be part of that family as well. It's a great way for me to give you guys back even more and for you guys to support what I do as well. So I will see you over there. See you really soon with another video, and remember to rock out like Eddie. By the way, if the cops show up because of noise complaints, just tell them that you're conducting important historical research on legendary guitar tones. I think that will work. What do you think? I think it will. See ya.
Thank you.